and welcome back to the workshop. Today I'm going to show you a little bit about how to thin your piece of leather, because for different projects you might want something thinned down a little bit. Say you're making just a small pouch or something, or you want to thin a little piece of leather to make a belt loop. You don't want it to be 3mm or 4mm thick, you just want to take it down a little bit to make the edges meet up really nice and closely. So what I'm going to show you is 4 or 5 different methods to do that. So first of all, we've got a very basic method, which is the traditional skiving knife. Now this one's made from an old hacksaw blade, which is really good metal for making a nice knife with, and it will hold the edge really well. So you can see, very basic, you just pop it onto the piece of leather and you just cut away. Now you change the angle of it depending on how much you want taken off. And of course, like all your tools, try and keep them really nice and sharp as much as you can. So that just glides through and cuts through and just thins it out, tapers it off. But obviously you can work a way down the whole length of your piece of leather if you want. Now there's different skiving tools as well. These make it a little bit more adjustable. There's a little blade in the back, and basically it does the same thing but in a sort of more controlled manner. You can just run down the piece of leather and take off pieces as you go like this. Also very good for, say you want to put some poppers on, some snaps. There might be certain parts of the leather that are too thick to get your popper through, so you can just skive a little bit off and make a little hole in it to get your popper through and just thin it off there. So they're really good and useful, and they don't cost an awful lot of money. There's also a little machine that we've got here, a little skiving machine, which is basically a blade with a little roller on the back and some adjustability. Now I've got a 3mm piece of leather here, and if I want to thin that down, I place it smooth side down, push this lever and put it into the machine, and then I just pull, and that takes off little thin pieces of leather like that. And if I still find that that's too thick for the job that I want it for, then I just twiddle the little knob underneath a little bit, just like that, half a turn or so, and then I can take a bit more off until you get it how you want it. Because I'm doing so much here in the workshop, I use a bigger machine. This used to be good enough for me, but now I've got a bigger machine called the Cobra Splitting Machine, and that does a really good job. So this is the machine, and you move this knob along to do different thicknesses of leather. Now that would be like super thick. Move it back this way towards number 3, which is mainly where I use it. Now these numbers don't mean an awful lot to me, because this machine's come from America and they measure the thickness of leather differently to how we measure it over here in England and Europe. Over here we measure it in millimetres, which is the actual thickness of it. In America and other places they're measuring it by weight, so they're measuring it in ounces, so it's a whole different ball game. There are other ways to measure leather as well. There's like fractions of an inch, and there's even an old measurement that shoemakers use called irons, and each iron is 1/48th of an inch. Now thankfully I don't use that so much now, because that's quite complicated mathematically for me, and the millimetres just keeps it simple. So what I usually do is, we've got sort of 3.5mm to 4mm leather here in the workshop, which is great for knife sheaths and belts. So I'm mainly, as I said, working up this end. So this one measures 3mm, and I want to make it thinner. Maybe if I'm going to make a field knife sheath or something like that, or an Atomax, I want it to be about 2.5 or something close to that. So I will move this little knob along. Now it cuts off the back of the leather, and the remaining sort of fritty bit that you've cut off falls down at the back. Sometimes it's thick enough to use little pieces of that. Sometimes use those inside the field knives, so it's not all waste. I've thinned it down, but I can tell by eye that that's still not quite thin enough for me, so I move the dial along a little bit and I pass it through again. So that's good, that looks about right for the project I'm going to use it for, so I'm very happy with that. As I said, the other The other devices and the skiving knife will work perfectly, but this is if you're doing lots of work. It's an industrial machine, so it gets a lot of use here, and really enjoy using this one. So I hope that's been helpful for your projects. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more, and hope to see you next time.